Chastity and Scandal. Quote, besides this blushing that was natural to me when in the presence of women, and which hindered me from looking at them, there was another reason which prompted me to adhere to this mode of conduct. It was a desire to profit souls. I remember having read years ago of a famous preacher who went to preach in a certain town. His preaching turned out to be very fruitful, and all the townsfolk were lavish in their praise of him. "Oh, what a saint," said they. Yet there was one exception of all these praises, and it came from a wicked man who said, "Perhaps he is a saint, but I can tell you one thing, and it is this: he likes women a great deal." For he was staring at them. This single expression was enough in itself to decrease the prestige which the good preacher had merited in that town, and not only that, but it brought to naught all the fruit which his preaching had produced. From the autobiography of Saint Anthony Marie Claret. All Christians are obliged to observe chastity. There will be formational material on the 6th and 9th commandment in the Catechism section of your formation. This conference will mainly be to discuss a few certain parts of the rule, the fact that we wear habits, and the communities we come from, and how this affects the practical outward observance of chastity. In the 4th chapter of our rule, it demands that we, quote, love chastity, and, quote, do not satisfy the desires of a corrupt nature. Today, it takes a great effort to avoid seeing provocatively dressed people, immodest behavior, and there is a general societal darkness of the intellect concerning what is chaste, moral, and becoming. I was reminded of this general darkness of the intellect recently when a gentleman, who seemed more or less to be a well-meaning Catholic, became friends with me on Facebook. He had wanted to join the Militia as a novice, and immediately in his feed I saw that he was liking images of very scantily clad women shooting firearms. We all suffer from original sin. Imagine, though, how would you have felt had you seen such an image liked by a priest, or a monk, or even just an altar server? You probably would not excuse the behavior as quickly as you would for a secular teenage boy. No doubt some Catholics would be amused by such an event, and others would positively cheer them on. Worst of all, some might move their goalpost on the line of what is a sin. They might say to themselves, if a monk or a priest is allowed to look at such things, and so am I, maybe I'm even allowed to look at something worse. This is one way how scandal spreads. As such, it is important to remember that this association is very visible. Your conduct, good or bad, will reflect not just upon this brotherhood, but will also shape the perceptions of both Catholic and non-Catholics of what we believe and how a Christian is to live. Our constitutions rightfully say that we should have, quote, conduct of life and purity of soul and body. You should, of course, keep custody of your eyes. This is the starting point. Even more so, though, you should not in any way be liking, sharing, commenting on anything, whether it is about the 6th or 9th commandment or anything else that can spread scandal. And I'm specifically thinking of social media. Also, we as a brotherhood ought to be exceptionally close. Bad conduct of any kind, even just the jovial recounting of past excesses, can greatly injure other brothers' fear of God in them. Quote, we therefore prohibit that a brother dare to recall with another brother or any other person the foolish actions he did when he was in secular chivalry and the pleasures of the flesh and other arguments of this sort. And should he hear by chance someone who recounts such things, he shall silence him or lead him back to obedience as quickly as possible. End quote, chapter 14. To pick an extreme example from the lives of the saints, it is said that St. Anthony of the Desert, that he was ashamed to even eat in front of his brothers. I urge you then, who wear the white habit ornamented with the red cross of our Lord, or seek to wear it, to be extremely careful the sharing of innocent pleasures through Facebook and such like, lest you give an example of worldliness rather than other worldliness, and give a bad example. It is also not any secret that this brotherhood is made up of many men that come from communities that are in fact otherworldly and strict. I will leave to your own experience if sometimes those communities of faithful that center around the Latin Mass may have persons within them who can rightfully be accused of being Jansenists, fundamentalists, and such like. It is important to remember, though, that St. Paul says, quote, "Wherefore, if meat scandalizes my brother, I will never eat flesh, lest I should scandalize my brother." 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 13. It is important when examining our outward actions that we consider the taste, tenacity, and sensitivity of our neighbor. It once did amaze me to find out the disgust and anger a companion of mine had because a priest liked to share pictures of the gourmet food he regularly ate on Facebook. Obviously, I am not encouraging anger against pictures of food, but rather how sometimes keeping certain aspects of our life mysterious, like what we eat, actually can be a benefit to our neighbor. Our rule also says as much. Quote, "They shall live in an irreproachable way, so that strangers may give evidence on behalf of them. They shall neither profane the spirit of the Militia, neither with words nor with deeds, but shall offer with their example the salt of wisdom and the seasoning of good deeds." Chapter 16 of the rule. And also, quote, "All the brothers have the precise obligation to take care of their aspect, to dress decently and with clothes suitable for any circumstance and respectful of social conventions, so that their presence may never offend anybody, but without yielding to the frivolity of fashions as evidence of poverty." End quote. I also wanted to add one more thing. Especially with news articles. Sometimes I see Catholics share like pictures of topless protesters going in to throw water on a bishop. Perfectly decent to want to share that news, I guess. Not so good if the main picture on Facebook is of the topless women throwing water on it. We have to resist the urge to go, look at how outrageous this latest Lindsay Lohan or whatever Miley Cyrus video is, by sharing it. And some people seem blind to this fact, and it's probably because of their innocence that they're not moved to lust by it. But if you were to see a brother do it out of anger, but we should never like point at a scandalously dressed woman and go, "Look at that, be angry with me," you know? So, the last thing I will say is to be especially careful about what entertainment you partake in, especially when it is done in a public forum, such as a movie theater, conference, or such like. I know of one young man who took his family to the Renaissance fair that was billed as family friendly, and at one point they went to go see The Juggler and Flame Spitter. At the beginning of the act, the entertainer took a vote on if he would do a kid-friendly show, one full of innuendo, which he excused by saying that it would go over the heads of the kids anyway. The family man, which this vote was done by cheered as loudly as he could with his large family for the kid-friendly show. Unfortunately, more people wanted the non-family friendly show, so despite having shown up early to get a seat in the front row, he and the whole family wound up walking out. Later in the day, the staff of the Renaissance Fair found that large family, apologized, and promised to do a kid-friendly show with no innuendo. So walking out didn't make a difference. Chastity brings joy to a Christian life. Lust is a terrible burden to be enslaved to. It deadens our zeal, brings us a sorrowful conscience, and ensnares our neighbors. If there is one thing that will destroy a man's courage, It makes him reluctant to lay down his life. It is a guilty conscience. Let us then strive to be chaste, modest and strict in our lives, so that we save our own souls, strengthen our brethren, and bring honor to our Lord, to whom all honor and glory is due. Examination. Do I ever like or share images or videos on social media that could scandalize my neighbor? Do I ever discuss past sins in a jocular way? Am I sensitive to the standards of the community of faithful that I live in? I might add to that those people can be very annoying. But if it destroys somebody's life, that you need to wear a tie on, just if, let's say it's not the dress code of your church, but they just desperately want all men to wear ties, why not wear one for their sake? Unless you're wearing this hat, in which case it's silly, but I mean, and I'm talking obviously about a degree of charity, but always trying to show sensitivity to that strictness. Obviously, if someone wants you to engage in madness, you can, like full-on weird Jansenism or something, but some standards that people ask for, they're in just dreadful need of people to show them some sensitivity. When witnessing bad behavior, do I leave, or do I excuse myself gracefully? Do I consider how my actions may reflect upon the church and this brotherhood before doing them? If I am corrected for engaging in bad behavior, do I apologize with humility?